Okay, so now we're going to go and look at the details behind our business object. And in this case, we're looking at the sales order. So we've got our sales order object typed in right up here. And we're going to go in and just display. And in the display view, we have our menus up here that we can use, again, for looking at the data model and kind of your basic menu paths on these. And then down here we've got some functions that we can use tied to this business object. Now these two over here, object type and functions and processes, are going to be more for, if you're building, say, interfaces with this business object or some kind of integration. Inverse can be handy because let's say you know the business object and you just want to see where exactly it fits. So we know our sales order, and this will kind of take us up the tree, so to say, and show us, oh, okay, we know that sales order is part of sales, which is part of logistics. Okay, and that gives us a little kind of information on what we're looking at if we don't know. Okay, kind of a where use list. You can see where this business object might be used in the system. Hierarchy is good. What this can show us is basically all the different kind of attributes and pieces of the sales order, even things like there's our order header, our item, our schedule line. You can look at all these kind of sub objects there, and each of these might have tables and even different types of orders: consignment orders, cash orders, rush orders. Okay. Then if I green arrow back here, consistency checks, and these first three buttons are really if you're changing a business object, if you have a custom object that you're working on. But what we're really after here to get out of this session is this thing right here, the graphic. Okay, so if I click on the graphic, what this does then is basically bring up a navigation area over here on the right. I can kind of click and move it around. But if you look within this navigation area, you're going to see all these small rectangles. These are all basically the objects or sub-objects making up that sales order. So over here on the left, we have the detail view. So if I move this down over here, I can kind of see this is going from right or left to right. Here's my top, and then all these sub-objects underneath it, and their sub-objects and their sub-objects, but it ties everything in together here. So we've got all these, again, menus and different functions I can do up here. With this, what I really want to focus on right now is taking this down a little bit. I can shrink it up so you can see. Here we are at the order, and you can see here's an order item. This is going to show you, okay, I've got a relationship here from the order, and I've got a one-to-many relationship with sales order items. And then from the order items, I can go down to the schedule line, and I'm going to have a relationship there of same thing. One item can have many schedule lines. And likewise, I can take this across and move this around and really look at everything related to the sales order object. So you can see how we started off, looking at the sales order, then we looked at the tables, and then we went to a field by field comparison. So now within this, I can look at that whole object altogether. And if I'm not familiar with that object, by going through each of these, I get a really good feel of what makes up a sales order business object. So I would approach it the same way if I'm dealing with a purchase order, production order, or whatever object. I want to look at what are all the components, okay? Now within that, I can select an object, and I can do a few things. I can go right down to the data dictionary, and it's going to show me the tables that relate to a sales order header. VBOC, VBKD, and VITA. All of these we looked at previously. I can do the same thing here at the item level. Dictionary, VBOP, VBKD, and there it's showing us another one, billing plan, which we didn't look at. It's not used as much, but it's an object that relates to the sales order item. So next, let's green arrow back here. Okay. And the next thing I want to point out is we can look at attributes of this item as well. If I select the sales order, we're going to go look at attributes. And now you can kind of see those fields and all the data elements and which ones are key, and the dictionary, if it's in the dictionary, 122. So it kind of matches up with our table that we looked at, our VBOC table. So you can kind of go back and forth here within this data model and see an awful lot about the object very quickly, okay? From looking at the table under the dictionary, from looking at the attributes or the fields, okay? There's a whole lot more here I can go look at too. There's all kinds of other functions. Predecessors, you know, if I look at an object, I can find what predecessors there are for it, what comes after it. I can go into the hypertext view on it. So if we continue through this process and look at all the different sub-objects related to the sales order, we'll eventually work our way through what we saw earlier, that whole list of tables. But what this gets you then is more, because you see how all the sub-objects relate to one another. By looking at a list of tables, I don't necessarily see that, you know, the relationships of the sales order header to the sales order items in the tables and how they relate to one another. And you can get to a lot of that same information. So kind of using these steps together just to get familiar, you know, if we want to review, I'd say, you know, look at an object, look at the business screens, the overview screens, get familiar with it. If you're already familiar with it, then you might look at the data model here and use the data model to look at how all the tables relate to one another, and it'll show you everything. Maybe you don't even know where to look to find all the tables. With this tool, you can find them all, or at least the majority of the ones, relatively easy. And then once you're down in the tables, then you can see the check tables and how they all relate to one another. And you basically build up this conceptual model of what you're looking at relatively quickly. And then to kind of see contextual information, if you're in that business object, you can always use the F1 and the F4 key and look at the details and find stuff that way too. So this is kind of wraps up the foundation or groundwork or all the pieces that we need to start doing data analysis. And we'll have some exercises here later on, I think, for other objects as well outside of the sales order, so you can get more comfortable with this approach. As it is right now, I think we'll go ahead and head on to the next section and jump into data analysis of the sales order.